pleasant good evening and welcome to another episode of The Observer. Yours truly, Mikey K, right here on Guile TV, Amplia Flow, Tigo, Facebook, YouTube. When you get the link, share, share, share. This evening we'll be speaking to attorney at law, Mr. Keel Taklak Singh, and also political scientist, Dr. Bishnu Raghunath. And don't forget, our bodies are under stress from environmental toxins to work stress to poor food choices and low nutrients in the food we eat. Our bodies are under a lot of stress, and all of these can lead to high inflammation levels. Excessive inflammation can lead to a large number of health problems. So, what do? Pick up your bottle of omega-3 fatty acids that help the body reduce inflammation. So, get your bottle of Omega XL today. We'll be right back.
The Excel brand delivers quality service.
I would recommend Omega Excel to everyone.
Take care of yourself, take care of your health with Omega XL.
If Omega XL works for me, it will work for you.
Over a period of time, I started feeling stronger in my knee where I could add more pressure.
Husqvarna, a global leader in outdoor power equipment, known for its high performance, durable and innovative products, tested and proven by generations of professionals. Full after sales and service support whenever you need it. Contact Provar Distributors Limited, 223-9438 to find a dealer near you.
Oh gosh, this place hot, and the AC in this car not working. It's like a driving a damn sauna.
Check Ryan Air. Ryan Air is ranked among the best in TNT for auto air conditioning service. They specialize in repairing and servicing all makes and models of vehicles and heavy equipment. They also stock a wide range of parts. Give them a call at 640-5828 or visit them at number 41 Kane Farm Road, Tacarigua, or email ryanairac@gmail.com. For prompt and efficient service, look no further than Ryan Air.
Limiting chronic inflammation is important for so many conditions that occur.
I had a lot of pain 4 years ago.
I used to have pain in my knees and my hip.
Taking it for arthritis.
Omega XL saved my life.
Then I started to realize, but hey, I could use my hands, I don't have any pain.
All in all, I am pleased to say that the Omega XL has worked.
Thank you so much, Master Control, and we are back. And joining us is a gentleman we haven't heard in a while, but he's no stranger to the Observer. Let me say a pleasant good evening to attorney at law, Mr. Keel Taklak Singh. Good evening, sir.
Good night to you, and good night to your listeners.
Thank you so much. You've studied, of course, the recommendations made by that's the National Advisory Committee on Constitutional Reform, the NACCR, which, of course, headed by former House Speaker Barindra Sinanan. And coming out of that, it's quite clear the PNM is saying no to fixed election dates and no to proportional representation for general elections. Many have weighed in on this, those political scientists, and they believe that it's a matter of maintaining the status quo, and it's basically politics that's playing out. What say you?
Well, two things. I tend to agree that exercises such as these tend to be more about political influence and an attempt to sway the political population as opposed to actually wanting to bring about meaningful change. We've had several commissions and several studies in our country. Quite recently, we had the study and commission of inquiry into the divers, that issue. We have had CLICO, we have had the UF report. No meaningful changes have taken place. So unfortunately, we have a tradition in this country whereby these types of reports are done at great expense. No meaningful changes are taking place, and it seems to be that they are done more to satiate the public and public demands for accountability as opposed to actually wanting to make meaningful changes and reform. But when it comes to constitutional reform and constitutionalism, my own personal bias is that as long as the population is discussing constitutional ideas, constitutional reform, constitutional proposals such as fixed elections, proportional representation, etc., I think it's a good thing because discourse brings about change eventually. No constitutional reform happens overnight. You know, you have the American experience with the Federalist Papers. It took many articles by philosophers such as James Madison before changes could have taken place. The British experience with the Magna Carta coming all the way up to the Petitioners of Right, these type of historical antecedents, they take place over time. So as long as we're having the conversation, I think that's a good thing. I agree with you that it's quite surprising that the very commission that is put in place by the current administration, which comes forward with reform, with concrete proposals, are being rejected by the PNM and for no good reason. What on earth could be the justification for opposing a fixed election date? That doesn't necessarily take away the right of a political leader of a certain political party to say they want to call early elections. But what on earth could be the objection to saying, well, look, at the end of the day, we have a fixed date for election so that all parties and political actors specifically know when an election is going to take place at worst case. What on earth, for instance, could be the objection to having a non-political Speaker of the House, unless, of course, you want to be able to wield influence, as we have seen taken place, because in my personal view, the Speaker of the House of Representatives and the President of the Senate, their conduct sometimes is extremely biased towards the ruling party. That is my view. It could be a view of a different person, but my view is that these office holders are extremely biased. So what on earth if the committee, as in the current case, says, well, look, we need to have a non-political Speaker of the House and a non-political President of the Senate. You have these low-hanging fruit, which is crying out for constitutional change in our country, and is actually documented by your own report, and by your own report, I mean a report commissioned by the current PNM government. Why on earth not enacted, unless, of course, you want to maintain the status quo, maintain majority rule, and maintain a sort of dictatorial hold over our country and its processes and institutions.
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, when you talk about the fact of a fixed date, and you're right, and when you look at what many of these analysts are weighing in and saying, is that these recommendations rejected by the PNM's Constitution Review Committee over the weekend basically does not, however, serve the interests of the party. Now, if we're talking about having public consultation and having people make their input, that in itself, Mr. Taklak Singh, would of course bring about some sort of social maturity. Are we even at that point where we're able to have the discussions in a very mature and a very comprehensive breakdown of these things, how they're going to benefit us as citizens? And that's the part that I don't seem to understand, and many people don't seem to understand that.
I agree with you, and I find it highly ironic that the report is actually named or entitled, quote-unquote, We the People. We the People is a slogan in the historical sense, where you had a shift of power and sovereignty away from absolute rulers, away from what we call the ancien regime, away from what you called the monarch, into the hands of the people, meaning that people would have the power through their representatives, through parliament, through their democratically elected representatives in a parliament. That is what We the People stands for. It was a shift away from rulers such as the crown and the king and sovereignty into the hands of the people. That is the name of the report chosen by this committee. It is a move to have people have a say in decisions which affect their lives and have a say in the way we govern ourselves and the way we govern our affairs. And here you have, in some instances, people have said, look, we want proportional representation, we want a non-political Speaker of the House, we want fixed date elections, we want more participation as a people in the governance of our affairs, and you're not doing it, and you've outright rejected this as a party, when in fact the ruling party controls the government. So what does that say? And the other thing I want to get into, if I could just say,
yes,
you had the Prime Minister trying to admonish the United National Congress and the UNC for not participating in the constitutional discussion. Nothing could be further from the truth. United National Congress stands as the party which, in my respectful view, has contributed perhaps the most to constitutional progress in our country. It is the United National Congress that gave us the Freedom of Information Act. Anytime someone files a constitutional case in this country, Mikey, anytime someone files a constitutional case, the first thing they do is they file a Freedom of Information, because you have to get the information to understand if your constitutional rights are violated. One of the major pieces of legislation that the UNC passed was the Judicial Review Act. That allows you to challenge public authorities when they abuse their power, and it is a fundamental constitutional principle that power ought not to be exercised arbitrarily or irrationally or unfairly. So it is the United National Congress, in my respectful view, that has progressed constitutional rights and human and fundamental rights in this country. So to say that we have not participated in the progression of constitutionalism in our country is an absolute untruth and should be admonished and criticized very severely. Further to that, the report actually cites the Ramadan Committee, which was a committee that was set up by the United National Congress and builds upon the Ramadan Committee reports. So what on earth is the Prime Minister talking about? And on top of that, if you want to get buy-in from the population, what good does it do you to simply come out and start to attack the United National Congress about non-participation? Why not send a report with a cover letter and say, look, UNC, what are your views on this? What are you willing to pass? What are you willing not to support? Let us know. Let us meet halfway in the middle. But of course, the Prime Minister, in his usual arrogant self, doesn't decide that he would take that approach. He decides to simply say, well, this is my report and this is what the PNM is going to support and not support. Well, good luck, because you're not going to get it passed in Parliament when you come to the majorities that are required under our current constitution.
And I agree with you. And again, a lot of these games that are being played out has nothing to do as far as with the citizens. I mean, here it is, you're saying public consultation. You want Joe Public to add his or her voice to something, which you said, according to the Prime Minister, when he congratulated the committee, maintaining that constitutional reform was essential for the country's future well-being. I want to repeat that. Where constitutional reform is essential for the country's future well-being. You are saying this is for the people, by the people, in the interests of the people, but yet still you pick and choose exactly what is being said by the people. It goes right back to saying the voice of the people is the voice of God, but you only listen conveniently to that voice. Why then should the opposition take that seriously? And as you mentioned, he said, I'm disappointed to say at this stage that the group of people who are in fact an arm of the government and parliament under the UNC leadership, I am disappointed to say that our country's opposition chose up to this point not to partake in this process. Well,
it's an unfortunate comment,
yeah,
extremely unfortunate.
Very unfortunate. But then you're giving credence to it. You're actually giving some life to it, because apparently they had all rights not to participate. Because at the end of the day, are you seriously listening to the voices of the people who are saying that we want a fixed election date? I mean, at this time and age, are we still going to have that old Manning saying it's in my back pocket and I have it, and you'll come and make a pronouncement today and play with it tomorrow? I mean, if you're serious about it, then democracy should never be a game, especially when it comes to the interests of the citizens.
Absolutely, and it seems that he isn't really respectful, or he doesn't really respect, quote-unquote, we the people. It seems to him the report is we the party, not we the people. So what we the party in the PNM say is right for the country, he wants to implement, not we the people who participated. And secondly, I don't think he's listening to the voices of the people. He might be listening to his own internal voices in his mind. And I suppose that brings us to his other coat of arms comment, where he says, look, this is what I want to change unilaterally, which is absolutely, again, against the very grain of what the constitutional report reports. And, you know, I want to say, yes, it is a fair political argument to say that this entire committee and constitutional reform exercise was a political charade intended to distract the population from the real issues that are afflicting us right now, such as crime, such as poor healthcare, such as a bad management of the economy, etc. I understand that, and that is a very understandable political argument to make. But nevertheless, we have a report before us, and there are some good points in the report. and you've mentioned some of them, fixed date for elections, etc. And there are good things in the report which no doubt people have been clamoring for in the population for many years. The problem is when that you have the Prime Minister coming to say, well, I am going to pick and choose what I will decide and ignore the will of the people, when you have to engage the opposition in a meaningful way in order to pass reform, because that is the way our parliament works. You can't get these reforms passed unless you have the support of the opposition, which currently controls a certain amount of seats in the parliament, and you require a certain majority to get some of these reforms passed. That is a fact that everybody knew even before you commissioned this report. So you always knew that you had to engage the opposition in a meaningful way, and a meaningful way does not simply mean appoint a commission, a report will be produced, and the opposition must come to a consultation. Why not ask the United National Congress, well, do you want to appoint 1 or 2 commissioners and let us make this thing meaningful? Or the report is there, write to the opposition leader and say, well, opposition leader, what in this report are you prepared to accept, if anything? If there are things that you are willing to accept with modification, let us know and let us see if we can get some meaningful change. That is the way a mature government ought to operate, but instead what we have is a real dictatorial type of tendency by the PNM and by Dr. Rowley, the Honorable Prime Minister, to simply say, well, this is what is going to happen, and this is what we support, and this is what I'm going to change. Too bad for you. You didn't participate. Absolutely, absolutely unacceptable in a modern democratic state.
And let's look at this. And looking at what has been accepted, I think the issue here, the underlining issue here really and truly is trust.
Yes.
That's the bottom line. So referendums were accepted. So what does that mean?
So I think in terms of referendums, and we have to be very clear. A referendum or a referendum procedure has to be incorporated into the laws of the country to say that decisions can be made with a referendum being made. Now, I support referendum for certain things. So let's say that they want to go about changing the final Court of Appeal from the Privy Council to the CCJ. That is a decision that is so ingrained and entrenched and important to all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago that you have to engage what is called quote-unquote direct democracy. You go straight to the people and you ask each and every citizen, if you care enough, come out, put your vote on a ballot and let us get a poll from the population as to what they support. And that has been done around the Caribbean. The removal of the Privy Council has actually been rejected by several other Caribbean states when it's gone to referendum. On the other hand, there are some decisions which there may be matters of economic affairs, there may be matters of highly specialist issues. You can't ask the ordinary citizen to give a view on that when they may be uninformed, and that is why you have a representative form of government by way of parliament. You elect representatives to take decisions on your behalf because you feel that you trust them, you feel that you have confidence in them, and you feel that they are capable to understand the issues, consult with you, get your views, and go in parliament and vote. So referendum is not simply just, we say referendum. There are many shades of referendum. It's a very technical issue, and I need to see further proposals on it. But in principle, I accept that referendum can be used in certain issues, such as whether or not we want to change the Privy Council to the final Court of Appeal, which of course I totally disagree with.
No, I agree with you on that. And again, the underlining here has to be trust. And that's the problem. I mean, we have seen so many independent offices and bodies being politically compromised. We're talking about the selection of a commissioner of police, and the list goes on. I'm going to be honest with you right here on The Observer. I would rather take my chance with that individual who is waking up in Manchester, England, on that morning, having his UK breakfast of eggs and beans and what have you, heading to the Privy Council. He doesn't know my social status. He or she doesn't know not even my ethnicity. He or she doesn't even know my political affiliation. They are just going to base everything on the facts that are presented to them. And if you have a political opponent that you could simply pick up the phone and compromise somewhere in the region, these are things that one have to look at. I'd rather take my chances with the Privy Council.
I agree with you fully. There is absolutely, in my view, absolutely no chance of any government in the Caribbean influencing the judges of the Privy Council. That is what I take security and comfort in. We know, for instance, in the local scenario, that the Prime Minister holds a power over the Chief Justice as to whether or not to initiate an investigation into certain allegations against the Chief Justice. So whether or not it was done because of favors exchange, which I cannot say, or whether it's simply a matter of perceived bias or perceived control over the judiciary, that is a question that has to be answered ultimately by a committee, by an investigative committee. But the point is, what I am sure about is that when you come to decisions of judicial integrity, or when you come to decisions or deciding judicial matters, the one thing that you want is absolute neutrality. And I am fairly sure that the Privy Council is absolutely neutral to these matters. And it was the very Eric Williams, who was the progenitor of the PNN, Dr. Rowley's progenitor, who said that in a small society, it is good to keep a body such as the Privy Council to treat with that, because everybody knows everybody in Trinidad. And that, of course, is no slur on any judge currently of either the High Court or the Court of Appeal. But the point is that the quality of decision-making, the quality of judicial arbitration that you get from the Privy Council is the best in the world. Unrivaled. It is the best in the world, so why give it up? And it is a fact that the world is moving towards London for judicial determinations. London is the seat of arbitration around the world. People in Hong Kong go to London for arbitration. People in East China, people in South America, people all over the world. When you have international disputes, you go to London because London is the seat of preferred arbitration. So why are we giving up the Privy Council, which is all automatically attractive to foreign investors who want to know that if they get in a dispute with another party, or the government of Trinidad and Tobago, they will get a neutral outcome. Why would you give up that at this time? And I'm not saying that at some point in time, we may have to revert to a Caribbean Court of Justice, but we have so much problems in our own judiciary. Our own judiciary is marred with controversy. Every time there's a promotion in our judiciary, there's a problem. The current Chief Justice has been found by his colleagues in the Court of Appeal to have acted potentially unlawfully in relation to the Marcia Sayers issue. Marcia Caesar issue. That is a finding of the Court of Appeal of 3 senior Court of Appeal judges, that the very Chief Justice, who's the head of the JLSC, may have acted unlawfully, and that matter is now on the way to the Privy Council. So why on earth would I be willing to give up the Privy Council that is untainted, uninfluenced, unbiased in determination of critical judicial issues for a local system which is unfortunately at this time marred? What I think you need to do is reform the JLSC, reform the way we appoint and promote judges in Trinidad and Tobago, and then let us have the discussion about whether we should move the Privy Council to the CCJ.
I agree. Increase autonomy for Tobago. That was accepted.
And I am a supporter of that. I make no bones about it. Let me just declare my bias. I do some work for the THA, etc. So just in case anybody wants to, they see Taklal Singh representing THA and he's singing this up, I declare my bias. That's not a problem. But that has no reason. That has nothing to do with my view. My view is that the THA and the THA is fully fit. They are filled with competent people and they require more power to treat with certain executive decisions in the Tobago House of Assembly and for the people of Tobago. That is not to say Tobago should secede from Trinidad and Tobago, but they must enjoy some autonomy. For instance, Tobago is now facing a rising crime problem. We know that. Why should the THA be saddled with the incompetence of Fitzgerald Hines and the incompetence of the current Commissioner of Police in treating with their crime problem? Why can't the THA get together and decide who they want to be the Commissioner of Police in Tobago to deal with the crime problem in Tobago and affecting citizens of Tobago, be it citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, but in particular in the locality of Tobago? Why not?
Yeah, you're right.
Yes?
Reformation of the Salaries Review Commission, accepted. That was accepted, all right.
Well, fair enough. That's a political football on both sides.
But there you go. Reformation of the responsibilities of the office of the DPP, that was accepted.
There has to be oversight of the DPP, and I have said this. In England, prosecutorial decisions are reviewed all the time by a superior body. So, where you have a decision to prosecute, the DPP says, I want to prosecute Mikey K, right? Then you have no problem because you have a trial, you have to go before a judge, a jury, a court of appeal, and a privy council that will all review the decision. However, where the privy council, where the DPP says, I am not going to prosecute somebody, what justice is there for victims of crime who may not have justice for their family members because the DPP says, well, I am not going to prosecute this person and that person, or I am not going to prosecute a political agent. In England, there is actually a prosecutorial review body filled with former judges and prosecutors, etc., which reviews, in England it's called the Criminal Prosecution Service, reviews the CPS decision and says, hey, you need to prosecute this matter because there is actually sufficient evidence for you to launch a prosecution. So I agree with that.
And reformation of the powers and role of the president, that was accepted.
I understand the executive president argument. I think that has come about because of the recent breaking of convention, I would say, by the PNM in appointing Kangaloo, Mrs. Kangaloo, to Her Excellency Mrs. Kangaloo to the office of the president. She's someone who is entrenched in the politics, entrenched in PNM politics, and now she has become the president. And whether or not she's fulfilling the role in a neutral or ostensibly neutral position, the point is she's someone who went around and said that saying that she had to preach the gospel of the PNM, and she's also responsible for appointments such as the Integrity Commission, such as the GLSC, who appoint judges in this country. So you see why people would have a problem and say, well, if you're going to make that position, if you're going to compromise that position politically, well, then we need to have a say in who's going to be there.
Yeah. Reformation of the appointment of the Commissioner of Police. We mentioned that earlier.
Well, and that is also a difficult one. We know that there was reform sometime in 2007 when Mr. Panne and Mr. Manning got together and said, look, they want to move away from this type of political appointment to the PNM, but we've seen the Prime Minister now intervene in a process to appoint a Commissioner of Police, so much so where, in my respectful view, it seems that the motive was to get at Gary, so to speak, quote unquote. I am no great fan of Gary Griffith, I have made that clear, but that does not mean we ought to disqualify the man from a job which he was clearly performing quite competently.
I agree. Yeah.
So so I whatever my personal feelings to sometimes, I think he goes a bit far on Facebook, etc., and those things, but that doesn't mean he wasn't being a good Commissioner of Police. And at the end of the day, making me and my family feel safe in our homes.
I agree with you on that. The right to a trial in a reasonable time was accepted.
Absolutely needed in our country right now. The law under ceremony in Arinsing is that we do not have a right to a trial in a speedy trial as there is in Jamaica. So you have people languishing in jails for many years, 10, 15 years, and they can't bring a constitutional motion or claim in the High Court to say that there's delay in their trial and they just have to wait. If you implement that right, then people, if they feel that they are delayed in the coming to fruition from time of charge to time of trial, they can have their trial faster and they can have a trial within 5 years, be it guilty, innocent, at least they have their day in court.
All right. And persons with disabilities, that was accepted. I mean, that in itself.
Well, I think that may be a bit too far in my respectful view because you have the Equal Opportunities Tribunal, which is allowed to intervene and determine whether or not persons with disabilities, and in fact, the jurisprudence has been expanded quite recently to include sexual harassment in the workplace. So even if women or men are being sexually harassed in the workplace, the Equal Opportunities Tribunal can arbitrate over that, and they can deal with discrimination so that the discrimination complaints need not be elevated to a constitutional status per se, but you have protection in the law to treat with that.
And reformation of sexual orientation rights. That was rejected.
I think that's a public sort of issue. Many people talk about whether or not you have the right to be identified as what gender, you want to be. That is a thing internationally. I think Trinidad, we're a more conservative society, and we have said you are what you are born as.
I agree with you on that, and I think that going into the election, that may not be popular for the ruling party.
It won't be, and I don't think there is a public clamoring to change it. Although I do believe that regardless of what person's sexual orientation may be, sexual preferences, they ought not to be discriminated against. I am one who say, for instance, there are certain benefits that a married couple and a man and wife may get. If two men live together, decide they take that decision, they want to live together, they should be the same benefits because fortunately or unfortunately, that is the decision they've made in their private life. They ought not to be discriminated against it.
Yeah, it goes back again to trust and social maturity. I mean, are we there yet? Are we? And I think the majority of people be like, listen, live and let live, because really and truly that does not affect, my space. It's not a matter of invasion.
The issue came about recently. I filed a case against customs, and I'm supposed to get a decision in September where the law prohibits adult toys. And the underlying argument is what people do in their bedroom is their damn business.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that brings us to the end of our interview. I want to thank you. Any closing comments? Go right ahead.
All I will say is that while I accept that this may very well be a distraction, a sort of troop for us to run behind, I do think that people ought to familiarize themselves with the report, ought to familiarize themselves with the constitutional issues which ultimately affect each and every citizen's quality of life in Trinidad today.
All right. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure as always. Best of luck to you and your entire team, and keep up the good work.
Take care. Bye.
All right. We'll be right back, folks.
Looking for top quality and affordable hardware supplies? Then look no further than Midland Hardware, number 97 Eastern Main Road, Arouca. We stock a wide range of tools, water tanks, blocks, lumber, steel, and everything you need for your home and business project. Check out our new display of steel windows and assorted designs of metal curtain rods. Midland also stockpiles sand, gravel, topsoil, and more. We have a variety of kitchen faucets, face basins, and toilet sets, bathroom mat sets, all garden tools, hand tools, generators, power washers, and water pumps. Customers can make payments via links, credit card, online payment, and cash on delivery. WhatsApp 327-7761 for free quotation, or give us a call at 646-2144. Open every day, Sunday to Sunday from 8 a.m. From foundation to finish, it's all at Midland.
Gosh, this place hot, and the AC in this car not working. It's like a driving a damn sauna.
Check Ryan Air. Ryan Air is ranked among the best in TNT for auto air conditioning service. They specialize in repairing and servicing all makes and models of vehicles and heavy equipment. They also stock a wide range of parts. Give them a call at 640-5828 or visit them at number 41 Kane Farm Road, Tacarigua, or email ryanairac@gmail.com. For prompt and efficient service, look no further than Ryan Air.
And we're back. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Master Control. Joining us is a gentleman who is no stranger to the Observer. Let me say a pleasant good evening to political scientist Dr. Bishnu Raghunath. Pleasant good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Yes.
Good evening to your listeners and viewers.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to have you on. I was speaking, first of all, to attorney at law, Mr. Keel Takla Singh. He was weighing in on the reports from the committee, Constitution Review Committee. And, a lot of questions, and I think it's only fair that we try to connect the dots for the viewers. Three of the things that were rejected was fixed dates for elections, proportional representation, and as well as the reformation of sexual orientation rights. The latter, which is the reformation of sexual orientation rights, do you believe that that basically was not even considered because going into the election, the party would not be popular?
Okay, so let me just back up a little bit. What report are we speaking about here? And I have concerns about this. Simply because the Constitutional Reform Advisory Committee, which presented its report last Wednesday, was that the report that was discussed at the PNM meeting on Sunday? Or was it some other constitutional reform committee within the PNM that was discussing that? And I raised that question from the simple point of view that I don't think that the Barry Sinanan report was only released on Wednesday. Did the PNM have privy to a copy of it before that would have allowed them to come up with some of those proposals on Sunday? Or is it some other report? Because I'm being told that the PNM set up their own internal constitutional reform committee led by Mr. Scotland since January. And I am a little bit concerned as to exactly what was discussed.
I'm glad you brought that up because, again, that has caused some confusion. Yes, by Mr. Scotland in the PNM, and basically that committee said that they examined 16 areas of the Constitution and they made some recommendations. But why make these recommendations public, knowing that the committee that was set about doing the work had just presented their report?
Well, that is a question that you'll have to ask the PNM. I cannot answer that. But that would be my concern. Exactly what was discussed on Sunday. Was it the report from the Barry Sinanan committee or is the report from a Scotland committee? I don't know. So I don't want to get drawn into a discussion when particularly I am not sure exactly who is saying what. Now, is it that the PNM is saying that they're not going to consider, they are not interested in considering, for instance, fixed dates for election or proportional representation? Is that the PNM's position? And if it is, well, fine, that is their position. It is their position to talk about whether we're talking about sexual orientation or whatever else. That is the PNM's position. Now question, and I assume that since that is the PNM's public perception, or at least they have made their position known publicly, when we go into considering the Barry Sinanan report, we will have already known what the PNM's position on some of these things are. So I am assuming that that is the reason why they would have made their report, or at least their issues, public. But I think it was an attempt to mislead and distract when we had, because again, we did not know exactly, when I say we, the general public was not aware of the Scotland committee. We know the PNM was having their own consultation, but I was under the impression that their consultation was feeded into the Barry Sinanan committee.
And I agree with you because it does seem a bit disingenuous to the fact that when you look at what's out here, it basically says that Mr. Scotland said the committee itself, on the line here, presented its findings to the party's General Counsel and Central Executive. He said the committee was also presenting its report, which of course was at the party convention over the weekend, as the PNM seeks to implement the proposed changes as the government. And in that same convention, Dr. Rowley, the Prime Minister, congratulated the committee, maintaining that constitutional reform was essential for the country's future and well-being. He went on to say that 32 civil society institutions, and again, that's where it gets complicated. He said the EBC Commission, the judiciary, he spoke about the United Nations Human Rights, and then saying in that same breath that he's disappointed to say at this stage that the group of people who are in fact an arm of the government and parliament under the UNC leadership, I am disappointed to say that our country's opposition chose up to this point not to partake in this process. Now, if this was a PNM internal process, why would he be disappointed in the UNC for not partaking in it?
And that is my concern. What was discussed at the PNM's meeting on Sunday? Was it the Barry Sinanan report? Or was it the Scotland report? Which committee report? Okay? Now, if you tell me it was the Barry Sinanan report, I will take that as a given. But the point about it, the Barry Sinanan report was only made public on Wednesday. I am assuming that the PNM had in this convention or whatever they had it on Sunday, in the works long before Wednesday of last week. And all of a sudden, here is the Barry Sinanan report being made public, and you've been asked now, did people have a chance to dissect what did the Barry Sinanan report suggest? What did they propose? And may I suggest one thing, or may I be very clear about one thing? The Barry Sinanan Committee, as far as I am concerned, was a prime ministerial committee. It was not a committee that was developed in fact, it was aptly named an constitutional reform advisory committee, if I'm not sure.
Yes.
Right. So it was not looking at it was to pull and distill ideas and concerns from within the society as a whole that would have fed into the discussions that would go on to constitutional reform when we set up a constitutional reform commission, so to speak. This was just an advisory committee. And the mere fact that it was an advisory committee, it was a prime ministerial advisory committee, meaning that it was formed without any participation or discussion with members of the opposition or anybody else, as far as I know. It was the Prime Minister handpicking Mr. Barry Sinanan, Mr. Terence Farrell, Mr. Nizam Mohammed, Mr. Richard from Tobago, and so on. And the Prime Minister handpicked a committee, which is an advisory committee. Does he really expect the opposition, who had no part to play in that process of selecting the people, or if, for the matter of fact, for that committee that was handpicked by the Prime Minister, but which was never discussed with anybody else, as far as I'm concerned, for the opposition to wholeheartedly welcome and participate in their process? I will tell you, and I have no qualms about saying this. In fact, I think everybody who got the report on Wednesday last week would have gotten in that report an appendix of a list of people who would have submitted proposals for consideration and to kind of guide the advisory committee as to where they go forward. And my name is on that list, so everybody would know that I submitted a proposal, my comments to the committee. But the point about it is that as far as I'm concerned, this was an advisory committee, merely to form a framework on which we go forward to discuss constitutional reform in the main. So I think it is disingenuous by the government to do two things. One, set up an advisory committee parallel to a P&M committee. And secondly, to discuss supposedly the two reports on one day in a P&M meeting. Because this was not open to every Tom, Dick, and Harry could have gone to Sunday's meeting.
No, it was. Yes, you're right.
Right? So in a P&M meeting, so clearly, this is not constitutional reform. And then further, as we go further, and you said you spoke to Mr. Taklal Singh earlier.
Yes, I did.
I did not hear that, but I am assuming that Mr. Taklal Singh would have emphasized or underscored the point that we are currently operating under the current constitution that we have in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
And that current constitution dictates and demands that to amend that constitution, we need special majorities. Right. In some cases, a 3/5 majority. In some cases, a 2/3 majority. Right? The PNM does not have a 3/5 nor 2/3 majority in the parliament at this point in time. So when the Prime Minister goes further and tells us that by November we want to have some other convention to discuss constitutional reform, my question here is, again, on what basis? Because as far as I'm aware, and the lawyers will tell me whether I'm right or wrong, but as far as I'm aware, you need, the government as it stands right now will need opposition support. Now, mind you, if the Prime Minister decides to call an election tomorrow, and he calls the election and he is able to win 29 seats or 30 seats, which gives him a 2/3 or a 3/5 or a 3/5 majority, he could amend some things in the Constitution based on that majority by himself without having to worry about this obstructionist opposition. I'm using the word obstructionist as an adjective here. But the point about it, until he doesn't have that quota in the parliament, he can't come and tell us he's going to have constitutional reform. We're going to amend the things that need a simple majority.
But so, Dr. Ryder, let me ask you then. So, what are we seeing playing out here? Is it just a matter of verbal acrobatics to deflect the real issues? I mean, because Mr. Scotland said, according to the committee's chair, Mr. Scotland, more than 800 people were consulted, while more than 125 people submitted oral and written contributions. Are these all members of the PNM, or is Joe Public a part of that?
I don't know what Mr. Scotland is talking about. Which report? I don't know which report he's talking about.
Well, he said the review began in January and ended in July, when then the report was handed to the Prime Minister.
So I am assuming if he's saying that, then he's saying it is the Barry Sinanan report.
But that's where it gets confusing.
Right? But then why did Scotland start his own committee?
Okay. It brings us back to the question, and what exactly are we seeing playing out here?
All right. So now we come to serious questions. What has played out here? One, we live in a country, in a society that is party politics abounds. We are going into an election. A general election is due. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's been already 4 years since the last general election. So we know that we are heading into the 5th year. An election could be called at any point in time. We know that too. Are we going to be scoring political points to say that the PNM has attempted constitutional reform? And this is where my word before, the obstructionists, opposition don't want constitutional reform. Is that going to be the campaign thrust of the PNM as we move into this election? It could very well be. The question that begs, however, is that as it stands right now, the Parliament as configured, I don't see constitutional reform happening as configured. They could talk as much as they want, and we've had this talk we've had this talk way back in the 1980s when the NAR had 33.3. We started constitutional reform, then talks, the Hayat-Ali Commission. What came out of the Hayat-Ali Commission? Very little. Then in the People's Partnership had, I think it was Hamid Ghani and several others, going around the country collecting views and positions with Prakash Ramada and saying we want constitutional reform, but then the party did not have the quota, the special majority, and they could not go forward. Mind you, there are little things that you could change.
Yes.
So, for instance, the UNC would boast now that they were able to bring in proportional representation, which they did in the context of local government. But local government was not part of the Constitution, and it's not part of the Constitution. So you could have used a simple majority and bring in proportional representation under the framework of local government. But that did not impact the Constitution. If you want to change the Constitution or amend the Constitution, you need the special majority. So the UNC could go around boasting and beating their chest and say, we brought moved from first past the post, a strictly first past the post, to a mixed system of first past the post and proportional representation, but not through constitutional reform. That was through simple majority legislation passed under local government. That is where we have the real problem.
So
you may recall.
Go ahead.
I'll just allow me this.
Mm-hmm.
You may recall what happened in 2020 and in 2021. In 2020, we were heading into the THA elections, the first election. The government attempted to bring constitutional reform. To change the constitution that will allow for greater autonomy for Tobago. But of course, there was opposition from the UNC, and there were voices in the Tobago who were saying no, and it was stymied, and it did not go forward. We had the first election in January. After that 6-6 tie in January, the government went forward now and said, we're going to amend the law again with simple majority, so we could now move from 12 seats to 15 seats in Tobago. But there was still the talk of Tobago needs constitutional reform because they need to have greater autonomy and self-government. And when the government took the bill to Parliament and realized they could not get that constitutional majority to change the Constitution, to give greater autonomy from Tobago, it all went silent. And they fought the election in December, and they lost that election in December. And since then, what have we heard about Tobago? Well, the president said earlier this year we should have constitutional reform to give Tobago more autonomy. So the government jumps up and says, yes, we're going to do it. But when they're going to do it, you know when? We are heading in, the term of the THA ends December next year. So we are going to come back again in the last year before the election to again propose constitutional reform.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, your big question, what's all of this about? It's about party politics.
Right.
It's about party dominancy and party ascendancy. And it's my party in power, and while I'm in power, I will do whatever it is to keep me in power. And I will use whatever campaign I can to carry and to give my party that needed support to say, I tried this, but it's the obstruction opposition who obstruct us.
That's right. And I'm glad you brought that point home, really and truly, because that's what it boils down to. Basically, this is a campaign strategy that is unfolding before our very eyes. And the people are going to be told that, listen, we want to deliver all of this. Referendums, making the Caribbean Court of Justice as the final court of appeal. The opposition is against it because they have cocoa in the sun. Increase autonomy for Tobago. We want to do it. The opposition is against it. Reformation of the Salaries Review Commission. We want to do it, but the opposition is against that. So basically, this whole strategy is about saying, we want to improve your life, but the individuals or the people, the body that is hindering this development is the opposition.
And that is where it is going to go forward into an election campaign.
There you go. We were able to connect the dots. Our time is up, Dr. Raghunathan, but I want to thank you so much again. Very insightful. So now we know. And closing comments?
Well, basically, all I can say is simply that I am still, we do need constitutional reform, but we need to have constitutional reform on a bipartisan basis, not on a one party or the party in government pulling together their own advisory committee and saying that that is the report on which we're moving forward on. And we need to sit down like mature, serious people. But if we're going to have what we had over the weekend as the approach to be taken, we're not really keen about constitutional reform. We're keen about winning power and staying in power. And mind you, if I ask the closing comments, one other point, the refusal to use fixed dates in an election, as well as to consider a mixed system of whether first past the post and proportional representation, because I think my proposal was we could have a first past the post in the lower house and proportional representation in the upper house. That way we allow people to have the government not to have that strong overwhelming majority in the upper house to pass everything they want. But the refusal to do that is simply an attempt to maintain the status quo. For when a party is in government, they do not want to change the constructs that will allow them to do as they please. And that is what, I mean, so I don't blame the PNM, don't get me wrong. I am not blaming the PNM. PNM is doing exactly what they have to do, because they want to stay in power and they want to ensure that they will continue and they will maintain their position in power based on the existing constitutional provisions.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah. Well, that says it all there, people. It says it all right there. We got like 1 minute, so very interesting. So again, Strong Heart is an all-natural omega-7 supplement that has been shown in clinical studies to be associated with heart health by supporting healthy cholesterol and inflammation levels. Research has shown that increased blood levels of omega-7 is associated with healthy HDL. So if you want to make sure and keep that, your heart not stressed out, and to keep it pumping and to keep your love muscle strong, get your bottle of Heart XL today. Quite interesting that we were able to connect the dots on what is being laid out here. And rather disingenuous of the government. But again, I think that Dr. Raghunath was on point when he said that whatever it takes, by any means necessary, to stay in government. And if you know that, and if you're not being, services, you're not getting the service that you want, you're not getting the deliveries of whatever it is that you need to get access to, then you have to ask yourself, are you going to be voting against yourself? How many times have you bought into this? These verbal acrobatics about one thing, and here it is, you're camouflaging it to look like something else, but are you going to get caught up in that? That's the main question. So, at least we know the campaign has started, and it's going to be all about blaming the other side. The other side is the one that's hindering you from development. The other side is preventing you from getting the best quality of life. The other side is the one that's keeping crime high in numbers. The other side is the one that's, maintaining this whole issue with home invasions and poor health care and the poor education system. But are you going to buy into that? That is the key question, because as you can see, anything to stay in power. That brings us to the end of our program. Sorry we didn't get a chance to open the lines, but we will tomorrow, God willing. Don't forget, 7 p.m. right back here on Guile TV. Again, Flow, Amplia, Tigo, Facebook, YouTube. And, of course, the interviews will be on YouTube. So subscribe to The Observer TT, and you will have those interviews as soon as it comes out after the program. Again, it's been a pleasure. Remember, we're observing, but action is right around the corner. Have a good one.
Observer. Mikey K, Mikey K, Mikey K, Mikey K.